This is perfect. We can ask lots of questions because I'm going to talk about actually doing something with FIPS 203. And, as a little bit of context, my background is sort of a quantum cryptography person of interest, I guess you could say. I call myself quantum cryptography curious, and that has led to us trying to figure out through working on security systems for defense and critical infrastructure, what we can do to start being more resilient now, and why we need to do that. So, for those who aren't as familiar or might not be as math oriented, the two largest problems with somebody developing a significantly sized quantum computer are Shor's and Grover's algorithms, which let us break our current asymmetric cryptography and symmetric cryptography, respectively. Out of these two, the really big problem is Shor's. It's the sort of wrecking ball of current asymmetric cryptography because you get to both attack the discrete log problem and factoring. So fast factoring, if you just sort of look at the order of magnitude of time pieces or operations that we have below for RSA 2048 or ECC 256, you're looking at going from time scales of like heat death of universe to weekend party for sufficiently sized quantum computer for RSA and for ECC. So yeah, I think the 2019 work that KTH and Google did was a sufficiently sized quantum computer would actually be able to break RSA 2048 in about 8 hours. And that's hopefully past 2035 when we get there. But in case it's not, maybe we should do something sooner on it. Grover's, you're just you're reducing things a little bit. Double your key size on your symmetric stuff, and I never said that, but you're probably fine for a while. At least till quantum computers get a lot better. So just sort of chasing along here, why now is probably the next logical question. And one of the issues we have is this idea of store now, decrypt later, download now, decrypt later, harvest now, decrypt later. They all mean the same thing. It's where an adversary has access to your networks, and not saying that as a former telco person, there's lots of problems with communications and packets that flow across telcos. But if you manage to bulk capture a lot of information that's encrypted and you save it till later and you have that capability to decrypt, that's when it becomes a really big problem. The gentleman before from NIST, I think that's actually Matt, his quote. So I find that kind of funny that we're identifying this as a real issue. So if we look at this, what does this mean? It means that if you have secrets that need to remain secret longer between now and when we have a cryptographic system that can actually break current cryptography, courtesy of a sufficiently sized quantum computer, let's call that Q-Day, which, by the way, as a sidebar, we're probably never going to know when that happens. People talk about Q-Day being this moment like we had in 1999 when we had Y2K, and it's like that was great because we knew when it was going to happen. If you think of the people who are spending lots and lots of money from an intelligence perspective on capabilities now, the last thing they want is other people to know. If I'm an adversary of the United States and I want to, decrypt all of the US's data, the last thing I want is them to know I have that code breaking capability. So we're not going to have a Q-Day event where suddenly and it's probably going to be a really interesting war of algorithmic probability as to what is leaking out and how could that have leaked out, and was that actually a break or was that some other form, which gets really, really interesting in game theory, and we're not going to get into. So the good news is that if we do have to migrate sooner than we think, and you have secrets that need to remain secret for a sufficiently long period of time, there are different mathematical functions, trapdoor functions that we can use. You can tell that my presentation abstract was submitted prior to FIPS 203 announcements, so I covered the bases here and talked about a bunch of things. But there are some challenges associated with those. And as opposed to digging into those now that we have wonderful FIPS 203, as Nick Polk said earlier, you can already do this. We've been working with Google and some friends since about 2020 on post-quantum cryptographic systems and deploying those and seeing how those work. If you pull up the security bar and you turn that on in Chrome, for the last while, you've been able to run a chem of X25519 and Kyber 768. Draft 00, I think, came from the University of Waterloo. It was deployed over a year ago in Chrome and is available with a flag to turn on. I think you don't even need to turn the flag on anymore. So we can, why a wrap, a hybrid chem wrap? Because there will be people who will say, hey, we're not sure if these new algorithms that NIST has announced are totally secure. So what NIST has done in FIPS 203, for example, which is for encryption, is they've done a classical cryptography algorithm wrapped with a best-in-class quantum algorithm or quantum resilient algorithm, and they've put those together to make a new algorithm that everyone can use. So you have, even if there is some sort of mathematical problem with Kyber, which is now ML Chem, we're still safe. So it allows us to gradually transition, and there's some really fun news, key size aside, about performance of Kyber on its own compared with RSA. RSA's been around for quite a long time, so it gets really exciting. But that's in the future after we're through this gradual transition phase. So the question of performance comes up a lot of the time, and I actually have some fun information to share and some real data and a little bit of background. So we started working with the people at the Defense Innovation Unit in 2017, and I've been cleared to talk about the fact that we've been collaborating on post-quantum cryptography for the last couple of years. I'd just like to thank Mike Brown, who was the director at the time, who sort of got us going in that work, and Doug Beck, the current director. They're forward-looking in their defensive stances. John Chen, their CIO, has been great to work with, and they've let us share some of the testing data we've done over the last year on, well, what actually happens when you implement X25519 Kyber 768, and you actually run it in environments that are loaded and have use. And so if you look here, this is our handshake and latency graph, although I notice we're missing the actual latency numbers. So you have the handshake numbers on the left, and you have in light blue and dark blue your handshakes, and you can see that there is definitely a drop-off when you go from using X25519 on its own to X25519 Kyber 768 on a fairly small system. But when you look at the performance implications of this, this is within a tolerable range of acceptability, at least from our perspective. The latency drop is not as significant as people would expect, so you can just sort of think of the differential there and what that actually means for most applications when you're doing something like a load balancer. So the way some of this work came about, just for reference, is we, as Lastwall, build an identity platform. We wanted to make it quantum resilient in case things happen to cryptography in the near future, as mentioned. And one of the things we needed was a load balancer that would run X25519 Kyber 768, or actually at the original time we started CEC PQ2 and others, and we did a bunch of different algorithms. We're happy that there's standardization happening, and we're really excited about FIPS 203, and for anyone who was involved in that, thank you. But performance-wise, if we get back and we sort of look at different distributions, and we look at different hardware sizes, so this is a different system. I'm not going to disclose exactly what the testing platforms were, but you can see that there is, in terms of latency on larger boxes or more cores, with one of the struts we built for our identity platform, which actually became something called Quantum Shield, which is a load balancer that's accessible and you can try out if you really want to. Contact me. You can see that it actually works pretty well. And it doesn't have a lot of difference when you move to post-quantum cryptography. You can also see that there is still that handshake issue. And this is something that we talked about internally, and we talked with a number of stakeholders of this project on. And we said, well, what does that actually mean? Because when you first look at it, if you're going from 3,000 handshakes per second to 2,000 handshakes per second, it can be concerning. You can say, wow, that's a pretty big performance drop. But when you look at an average connection size and you look at the actual data that comes after the handshake for an HTTP session in terms of actually sending traffic over a network, the performance is actually not all that much different when you have a 10 KB HTTPS request. So I'm realizing that as there are people here who are maybe not as technical, hopefully I'm not being too technical, but for folks who may not follow that side, what this really means is that while there is a performance hit on the initial connection, that in relative contrast is very slow. And if you look at the idea of upgrading hardware or hardware requirements to actually serve real life data, it's not overly significant. In the same way, if we increase the number of processors, or as we increase the number of processors, and we look at average latency for 10K requests, you can see that X25519 Kyber 768, ML-Chem, FIPS 203 are very direct lines from this data. It actually doesn't make a really large difference in terms of your real world performance. So that was something that I wanted to share. FIPS 203 people, thank you very much. As they were highlighting before, I feel like my talk should have come before because they covered this in depth, but that's okay. I'm just teasing our moderators here a little bit. But yeah, we can actually start implementing. And as we're at the Quantum World Congress, as I've mentioned, we do have a product called Quantum Shield. We're going to be announcing next month that we're making that free for use for individuals, for academic institutions, for nonprofits, and for non-commercial or non-production commercial use, because there's a lot of fear about deploying post-quantum cryptography. And sometimes people need a way to show how you can use this and to show that it's not going to brick systems and break things. So for everyone here at Quantum World Congress, you heard it here first. It's going to be officially announced later. But if you want to try out a load balancer that's running PQC capabilities, where you can make your applications connect with Chrome and it's just quantum resilient at a TLS layer as a first step in your migration path, that's coming soon, and feel free to reach out. So yeah, I'm Karl from Lastwall, and now I'll take questions. Everyone's so stunned.
There we go.
Yes, thank you. We have done some work with digital signatures. I don't have the ability to talk about that at this point. But yeah, we have done some work with the others, and there are some more challenges with some of the signature pieces, but that was not the focus of this one. So.
All right, I think we're going to have to cut it a little bit short there because we famously went over time. Thank you very much, Karl. Round of applause for Karl. That was really impressive. Thank you for wrapping that up.